Welcome to Addicted to Busy, the podcast specifically for overachieving property managers who are dying for a little more work-life balance in their lives. Each week, we dismantle all the BS that holds us back. You'll learn how to nix those tricky, self-sabotaging habits so that you have the time, energy, and motivation to create what you really want in life. If you're looking to shift from overcommitted to overjoyed, this is the podcast for you. Let's do this. Now, your host, Anna Havliana.
Hello, and welcome back to Addicted to Busy. I am so excited for today's episode. We have such a treat today. Molly Zemek is going to join us and talk about decoding your emotional appetite. For those of you who don't know, my first introduction to coaching was actually a weight loss program because for me, weight loss felt like the one thing that I just could not get a handle on. And getting coached on weight loss was the first time that I have made an investment in myself. And within the course of that year, I just saw my personal development take off in a way that I'd never experienced before. And of course, that was kind of my gateway coaching experience to what has now become Addicted to Busy. Molly Zemek and I have worked together in the past. She has coached me personally, and I'm so excited to announce that she has written a book. I know that a lot of what she talks about are things that you have felt and experienced in your own life as a busy property manager. So, as I mentioned, Molly is a professionally trained chef. She's a certified sommelier, and now she gets to say that she's the author of the new book, Decoding Your Emotional Appetite, a food lover's guide to weight loss. She hosts the internationally ranked podcast, Weight Loss for Food Lovers, where she empowers food and wine lovers to feel and look their best without sacrificing the things they love. In her private coaching practice, she empowers people to create mindful eating and drinking habits so they can achieve their goals inside and out. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's just so fun to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
I'm excited for you for a number of reasons. First of all, I've been able to work with you in the past, and I know just how impactful that's been for me. But you also just went through the process of writing a book, which is no small feat. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to write this book.
Well, it's been a personal dream of mine and goal to write a book for as long as I can remember. I love to write. I have an advanced degree in writing, and it's something that has been on my New Year's resolution list for probably the last 7 years, but it's the one thing that I just continue to put off because it just felt the hardest. And I had an opportunity to create a proposal for a nonfiction book, and I knew that I really wanted to share a lot of the story of my personal transformation and a lot of the concepts that I teach inside of my program about mindful eating and drinking habits with just more and more people, just so that more and more people can have access to this different kind of approach. And so it was really just kind of the right time and the right opportunity. And I was fortunate to have a company that was interested in publishing it. So I'm really pleased with how all of the information came together. I talk a lot about my journey as a food lover and how I went through my own transformation of really healing my relationship with food and alcohol and healing my relationship with myself. But then I also talk about the experience of a lot of my clients. So I think there is something for everybody, especially if you're a food lover. There is a story in there for sure that you can relate to. I'm just excited for people to have access to it.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit more about the title of your book. What does it mean to quote unquote decode your emotional appetite?
Great question. So what I discovered through my own journey of creating more mindful eating and drinking habits and also working with clients is that really there are two different kinds of hunger. There's physical hunger, our body's indication that we need fuel, that we need to eat for nourishment. And there are very clear physical signs for that. But then there's a different kind of hunger, right? There's that hunger that sounds like, ooh, I really want that. That would taste great. Or I'm just really craving this piece of chocolate cake. Or you know what? I need to have this. That's not tied to actual physical hunger, but it's what I call emotional hunger. So
Mhm.
it's really all your emotional appetite is the appetite that you have to eat when you're not physically hungry. And I think for people like me and for a lot of the people that I work with who struggle with eating more than what their bodies actually need, it's really a matter of distinguishing that emotional appetite from your physical appetite. But when we're not used to doing that and we're really focused on food and eating for a variety of reasons, we can feel stuck in this habit of eating more than we need to, but really unsure of how to change it. And so this is really the answer, in my opinion, to feeling better, looking better, and getting to know yourself in a deeper way and developing emotional resiliency is really learning like what are some of the emotional reasons why I'm turning to food when I don't need to, so that I can address those needs without eating and actually create more well-being for myself and create a deeper sense of peace. So essentially that's what decoding your emotional appetite is all about. It's about learning the difference between your emotional appetite and your physical appetite and the reasons why you might be turning to food and what the actual solution is to address those needs if you're not actually hungry.
Oh gosh, as you were explaining that, I was recalling, I want to say it was 2014, I can't remember. I was in a position at work where I was working all the time. Our property was going through a refinance, which meant that there was just a lot of paperwork to get done at the same time that we were doing a lot of capital improvement projects. And I remember I wouldn't eat all day because in my mind there was no time to eat. I needed to be
Mm,
working all the time. And then I'd get
mhm,
to the end of my workday and I'd be so physically tired and emotionally drained that I would just eat either whatever was on the way home or whatever was left in my fridge, and I was not consciously aware that there was a difference between physical and or emotional hunger.
mhm,
How can one distinguish between the two?
mm. So the situation that you're describing is really common. I think so many of us can relate to that, right? Food is often a way that we cope with stress. It's a way that we feel better in the moment. It's a way that we give ourselves me time, right? I mean, it's a way that we recover from feeling overwhelmed. There's so many different layers to this. Often the first point of awareness is recognizing how your body responds to this. For instance, in your situation, when you're coming home from a busy day and you're eating and continuing to eat and probably going past the point of your ideal satiety, your body is responding a certain way. And often what I hear from people, and I know this from personal experience, our bodies indicate, you know what, this doesn't feel great. Like this is too
Mhm.
much. I'm either feeling bloated or I feel just stuffed or I have a hard time sleeping. We often get negative feedback from our body that our body doesn't love this amount of food or doesn't love this habit of stuffing ourselves. And so often when people are ready to kind of change their habits is because they realize, you know what, eating this way isn't really helping me feel good. I don't love the results of this emotionally or physically. And
Mhm.
so one of the really simple ways that we can start decoding our emotional appetite in a situation like you described is by beginning to just listen for true hunger. I mean, of
Mhm.
course, you need to make the time to do that. And so many of us are busy. We have a million distractions during the course of a day, and we're either used to ignoring hunger or, for some people, we're just eating as a way to distract ourselves from work. I encourage people to stop and just consider if you're thinking about food, ask yourself like, am I getting physical signs of hunger? Is my stomach growling? Is there a sense of emptiness? Am I feeling lightheaded? Am I feeling like some kind of gnawing? Or for somebody like you, I really want to make time to pay attention to how my body's feeling throughout the day. I don't want to let myself get to a point where I've ignored hunger And then I'm making up for it by just eating a lot all at once, right? And so I'm going to really check in with myself during the day and just consider, am I noticing any signs of hunger? If
Mhm.
I'm feeling hungry, it's time to eat. And that's really the ideal time to eat, Anna, because you're able then to notice when you reach that ideal satiety point too. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, I've satisfied the hunger. I feel nourished and I'm not full. My body feels great. And that's what I encourage people to aim for is eat when you're hungry, because it will be easier to tell when your ideal satiety point is, but it will also make the experience more enjoyable. The food tastes better, it's more satisfying to eat when you're hungry. And
Mhm.
then in those instances when you're thinking about food and you're not hungry, then the question is, what is it that I really need in this moment? Because if I'm not hungry, food is not the answer here. What is it
Mhm.
that I really need? Maybe I'm physically tired. I need to take a break. Maybe I need to connect with somebody. I'm feeling lonely. Like maybe I'm going to call a friend. Maybe I'm bored and I need to find something fun to do. And then
Absolutely.
you can begin to slowly satisfy those other needs.
Absolutely. I think for me at that stage in my life, like what I really needed more than anything was rest. But since I'd spent
Mm,
so much time at work and I was getting home late, it just felt like there were only 2 hours in the day left for me, and I wanted to do something that felt good, so food and Netflix was a very easy way to do something that felt pleasurable. And ultimately, to your point, it came down to the fact that that's not how I wanted to spend my time, but I didn't have the time to do the things that I actually wanted to do. And so it was this blend of trying to figure out how to better manage my time better and then also trying to
mm,
fuel myself better so that I was physically ready to, engage in the projects and hobbies that I wanted to partake in.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oftentimes, as you know, because this is your expertise, we don't prioritize ourselves, and so we make time for all of the other things, and then we arrive at the end of the day so emotionally and physically spent, it's very difficult to control urges to eat or to drink for some people, right? Because we don't have any energy. And so
Mhm.
it's about peeling back the layers, like you said, and addressing the need earlier in the day and recognizing if I really want to feel better at the end of the day, if I don't want to have all of these cravings, if I want to just have the focus and the energy to do the things that I want, then I need to start taking care of myself earlier and really making that a priority and finding the time to address it sooner.
Mhm, absolutely. Well, I think for some of us, I know I've experienced this, it can become a habit to
Mhm.
overeat and overdrink. And I know this is something that you have seen in your work. What are some of those main reasons why people overeat and overdrink habitually?
Well, there are many. It really depends on the person. I would say that the situation that you described is a really common one, especially for busy professionals, especially for working moms. We are committed to so many other things, and we're used to putting ourselves last, that we go through our day with this sense of overwhelm because we're believing we just have more to do than we can handle, or there's not enough time. And we end up turning to food and alcohol as our own reprieve at the end of the day. And we're used to doing that. Where it's like, oh, well, this is like my time to just relax. And this is pleasurable. And this is a very convenient way to just feel better and experience some momentary pleasure and comfort. And so I would say feeling overwhelmed because you're overcommitted and food and alcohol then turns into an escape is one of the more common reasons that I see. But for some people, it's also boredom. I mean,
Mhm,
there are people in situations where they're not fully satisfied with the life that they're living, or they've ignored some of their deeper desires, and then they're turning to food and alcohol as momentary pleasure and as kind of a distraction, and not really thinking, okay, what is it that I really want for myself? What would be deeply fulfilling? And
mhm,
so as a way to sort of maybe deal with boredom, they use food and alcohol as a way to feel better. There are many reasons. A couple others are as a way to connect with people. That's something that's very culturally acceptable, is to connect with people through drinking, through eating, as a way to show love. And sometimes we feel left out, or we feel like we don't belong if we're not participating in all of the eating or all of the drinking, and we feel a sense of obligation. Again, it comes back to just really paying attention to your body. None of those things are bad. I mean, I am a huge proponent of eating for pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
and drinking alcohol if that's something that you enjoy, and doing it in a very intentional way. But when it turns into a way to deal with your emotions, that's often when people experience the negative side effects that come with overindulging in food and alcohol, and they inevitably feel physically and emotionally worse.
Well, and to your point of using food or alcohol to not feel your emotion, we have to be clear that the food and alcohol doesn't solve for the emotion. It just
Mhm,
delays you evaluating that emotion at a later time and date, right?
mhm, mhm.
It makes us feel amazing in the moment, but our problems or our worries or our fears are still going to exist when we wake up the next morning. That brings us to a really, a fun question, which is how do you either create or experience more pleasure in eating?
This is probably my favorite question of all. As somebody who loves food and loves to eat well, what I discovered, which just seemed like a miracle to me, because in in past history, I would often try and diet as a way to offset the eating that I was doing. And the dieting that I tried often involved eliminating my favorite foods. And I
Mm,
could do it for a period of time, and I'd be able to lose weight. And then it always ended the same way with me going back to overeating, because I just didn't want to give up my favorite foods. And I realized when I finally figured out how to solve this once and for all, that I needed an approach that didn't exclude the things that I love to eat. And so what I discovered was that if I was much more intentional about having food that I loved, having indulgent foods that are not part of the conventional approach to weight loss, that I could actually bring all five senses to the experience of eating, and really experienced even more pleasure by just noticing the pleasure and how food looks, right? First, we eat with our eyes, is something that I say in my book, like just noticing the pleasure in the visual appeal of food. And then when you taste food, noticing the texture or the contrast in the temperature, noticing the flavor, all of the nuances of flavor, noticing the smell. But usually we're so distracted, Anna, when we're eating, that we miss like 50% of the pleasure in eating. And then, of course, we get to sort of the end of the meal, and we feel like we still need more because we've missed out on actually that full pleasure. So it's about bringing all five senses and really heightened awareness to eating foods that you love, and really being intentional about, okay, if I'm going to eat something that's indulgent that I really love, that I don't want to eat a lot of because it's not going to help me maintain my ideal weight, then I need to really be deliberate in planning that, so that I'm not eating it out of urgency, that I'm not eating it spontaneously, so that I'm actually be able to fully concentrate in an undistracted way on really savoring it.
hmm I know that I am still guilty of this from time to time, but to your point, I think food can be a big distraction, but I also think we can be distracted when we eat our food. See a lot of managers who they sit down for their lunch, but they are still staring at their computer screens and they're still typing away and responding to things. And so they're not able to take in that full experience of their meal, which again, if you're not aware of what you're eating, if you're not using your senses, you might not feel satisfied at the end of that meal. And that could be
Mhm,
because your brain hasn't caught up with the sensation of being full, but then
mhm,
B, because you haven't actually taken a break. You haven't actually taken any respite, which in my opinion is part of what a meal offers us, is that
mhm,
chance to take a moment from whatever it
mhm,
is that we were working on and come back to our body, come back to ourselves, and come back to the present moment.
mhm. Yeah, 100%. I think that busyness can become a habit. It feels almost like an emotional habit that we get into, where we feel comfortable in that restless, like frenetic energy. That's where we almost feel safe because that's what we're used to. So
Mhm.
it will probably feel uncomfortable for, your clients, a lot of the people that you speak to change this pattern. It's not going to feel, easy or like the natural way of doing things, because we are used to going through life at this certain pace. But we do have the ability to decide ahead of time, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm really going to focus on closing my computer, not having my phone, and just paying attention to my body, paying attention to what I'm eating, and noticing the pleasure in that, noticing the break that I give myself and how much better I feel. And then over time, the more that are decisive in doing that, that becomes the new norm. That feels like the way that you always do things. And it's so much easier to stay in control and to eat the ideal amount and also enjoy food more when you're approaching it that way.
Absolutely. Well, and I think of the act of some people will even say a prayer before a meal as a moment to just almost signify to the body and brain, like, hey, we're
Mhm.
stopping what we're doing and we're
Mhm.
gonna consume now and we're gonna nourish and we're gonna take things in. But when we start picking up our phone or when we start looking at the computer screen again, now we're only taking in with a few of our senses and not all of them, which really detracts from the experience. I remember when I first started coaching, one of my goals for my clients is that they create more control over their time and energy so that they can get back to doing, the things that they actually want to do. Things like taking care of their health or spending more time with family or engaging in projects or hobbies or sports that they miss.
Mhm.
And so when I first started coaching, I remember there were these two clients I was working with, and I was like, what would you want to do with your free time? And I was expecting to get answers such as, I'd like to run a 5K or I'd like to pick up crafting again. And they both said, I just want a lunch break. And that was when I realized, oh, wow, like this problem is a little bit deeper than I thought. Like, if we can't even get you to take time for lunch, how are we going to
Mm.
get you to take time for all the
Mhm.
other things that you want to accomplish in your lifetime?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, yes, I think busyness, it's a habit, it's a distraction, and it kind of compounds on itself when you don't pay attention to how it's impacting the way that you spend your time.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And you know what? It is really the little things like that that make such a big difference in terms of how you feel at the end of the day. Making that time to just be fully present with your meal really gives you that micro break. And you do have the time for that. I mean, we all have the time for little breaks like that. We just have to make it a priority.
Mhm.
But over the course of the day, that adds up in terms of how you feel when you come home, your ability to rest, your ability to engage in the things that you enjoy, your stress level, right? Your overall sense of well-being. And I do think that we underestimate the pleasure that can be had in just sitting down, pausing, setting that intention for our meal. I love that you gave the example of saying a prayer. That's something that I personally do. And I often also recommend to my clients that they just really focus on that first bite and they remind themselves, like, this is where the majority of the pleasure is in the first couple bites. And I don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah,
For
such
me
a good
personally,
point.
yeah, for me personally as a food lover, it's like I don't wanna miss out on the delicious food, and so even if I'm feeling hurried or restless, I try and, like, use my breathing to calm down my nervous system, and I just tell myself, "Okay, let's reset because you don't wanna miss out on this meal." And you will if you don't just allow yourself to relax and really pay attention.
Mhm. I might be making an assumption here, and you can correct me, but being a chef and a sommelier where you are literally surrounded by food and drink as part of your job, was it difficult to change your relationship with food? Or what challenges did you overcome as you healed your relationship to food?
It was difficult only in the sense that for a long time, I believed that I would just never be able to figure this out. I
Mm,
really thought that I just loved food too much and that I loved wine too much and that it would just be too difficult for somebody like me to ever change the habit of overeating because I mistakenly thought that more was better. Right? I hadn't yet learned that it was actually my thinking and a lot of these habits that we're talking about that were contributing to the overeating. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to really reconcile this belief that actually more is better. I used to think, no, I need like 3 bowls of ice cream. Otherwise, it's just like, what's the point? It's not satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was used to just always eating with a sense of urgency, always thinking like, this is so delicious. This is my favorite thing. I need more. I need more. And this is something that I think often a lot of food lovers believe is that actually if one bite's delicious, 20 bites is even better. And that's absolutely not true, right? You reach what I call a tipping point with pleasure, where the flavor diminishes. And it's actually after only a couple of bites. And then also the pleasure in our bodies diminish the more we eat. So it's not more satisfying the more you eat. That was something that I had to overcome because of my love of food. I would say when I was working as a chef, my schedule was so busy,
Mm-hmm.
and I often ran into the same predicament that you were describing, where I wouldn't eat a lot during the day. I mean, I was working in a restaurant, and it was just, I mean, a very pressurized environment, not a lot of time to eat. We were surrounded by delicious food, but it was a very fast-paced lifestyle. And so by the time I finished my shift, I would come home and just unwind by eating and drinking and overdoing it. And that would be sort of the routine that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the obstacles that I faced are not that different from what other people face. It was just a different variety of thoughts.
Absolutely. I see so many parallels between our relationship to food and my clients' relationship to the way they spend their time in their careers. You
Mm,
had mentioned that more is better, and you felt like it wasn't enough unless it was 3 bowls of ice cream, but that eventually there's a tipping point where you're no longer getting the same return on investment, right? And then we stop enjoying it as much. The same thing is true in the way that we spend our time at work. We have so many
mm,
managers who think I need to be working all the time. More time is better. But then there's this tipping point where you're exhausted. And so the
mm.
work that you are doing, there's a higher probability that you're going to make mistakes. And then there's a definite tipping point where you're not enjoying the work anymore because you're so exhausted. And I think whether it's food, whether it's the way that you manage your time, it's your responsibility to find those thresholds and treat them with respect instead of constantly pushing yourself to the point where this is no longer enjoyable and it's no longer beneficial.
Mm. I love that analogy. And I think that it boils down to this idea that it's just never enough. So
Mm-hmm.
many of us go through our days with this scarcity mindset, whether it's with work, like I should be doing more, or maybe I'm not making enough money, or if and it's the same thing with food. And it's about maybe sitting down and just asking yourself, okay, what is enough? Like, how would I define enough? And
Mm-hmm.
and certainly when it comes to food, it's like, okay, enough is when I've reached that ideal satiety point. Enough is when I am allowing myself some indulgences and really savoring the maximum pleasure that I can, while not sacrificing the pleasure in my body. And I'm sure for your clients, enough is based around their unique values in terms of what they're trying to accomplish with their work and the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we talk a lot about overdoing it, right? Everything
Mm,
is fine in moderation. It's just that whether it's work, whether it's dessert, whether it's scrolling on your phone, there is this point where we're no longer deriving pleasure that benefits us. We're deriving pleasure to distract ourselves and avoid
mhm,
what it
mhm,
is that's going on around us. Now, I think that in many cases, when we engage in these types of behaviors, what we're really looking for is relief, right? And food is such an easy place to get relief because it's so easily accessible to us. I mean, I don't even have to leave my apartment at 2 in the morning and I can have food delivered to me. It is wild. But again, it's never going to give us actual relief from what it is that we're feeling.
I agree. And that is such a common thought that many of us have with alcohol too. It's like, oh, I just need something to take the edge off, right?
Hmm.
Whether it's that glass of wine, whether it's that bag of chips. And what I like to tell my clients, because this is a thought that really served me, is that I would tell myself, oh, it's such a relief that I don't have to overeat tonight, that I don't have to have a drink. It's such a relief that I get to go to bed feeling good, feeling light, feeling nourished, but not overfed. It's such a relief that I get to wake up tomorrow morning feeling energized, like starting the day with excitement, knowing that I have a lot of energy. Like that is such a relief. And so I think that we realize when we do turn to food and alcohol to relieve ourselves and we overdo it, that it kind of has the opposite effect. It drains us.
Oh,
Right?
100%. I'm thinking of networking events. There was a point in time where I would dread going to network events 2 and 3 days before it was even time to go because I knew there's a high probability that I'm going to overdrink. And I already know that
Mm,
when I do that, that the next morning I will wake up wondering what I said the day before.
hmm.
I wake up exhausted and I still have to go to work that day and try and function. And my relationship with alcohol is one that I'm particularly proud of because, to your point earlier, it just felt factually true that there's no way I could go to a networking event and not drink. That's what you do
Hmm.
at networking events. But now I don't even think twice about it. I have no issue turning down a drink. And I also don't have any issue determining whether or not a drink would actually satisfy me in the moment. And it feels so different walking into those events with that level of confidence, knowing that tomorrow morning I'm going to feel mentally and physically great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that yeah, I've had that same experience. And I think it sounds like based on the way you're talking about it, that you've realized going through the discomfort of those first couple of events where you didn't drink and figuring out how to navigate that was totally worth it because it opened you up to all of the pleasure that you experience without drinking. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what's hard for people to figure out in the beginning when they know, you know what, I don't love the way I feel after drinking, but it really feels hard to not participate because that's what everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing stories like yours, and I share my story too of figuring this out, that you can just feel so much better on the other side, and it can become easy. It can really become the norm once you get used to showing up at those situations and feeling confident not having a drink. Most
Mm-hmm.
people don't care, right? But we think that the spotlight will be on us if we're not drinking, and that's usually not the case, but we have to go through enough situations of stepping into that future version of ourselves to realize, oh, like this is easier than I think, and I can feel confident doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, for the record, I'm still trying to replicate this with ice cream. I'm definitely like a 2 bowl, 3 scoop type of person with ice cream. But again, I don't really worry about my relationship with sweets and desserts because I have evidence that I've been able to change my relationship to alcohol. Well, maybe you
Yeah.
can weigh in on that. I have no clue why alcohol was so much easier than, than desserts, but I definitely still have moments where I push past the point of enough, and I'm
Well,
still learning that lesson.
and I think it's worth saying that we're not aiming for perfection here. I think that perfectionist thinking, not that that's what you're describing, but I know that when we're able to change our habits in one area, we think, well, we should be able to do this in all areas. And I think that, it's about recognizing, wow, I was able to do this with drinking. That's incredible. If I was able to do it with drinking, I could probably change my relationship with ice cream if I want to. But there
Mhm.
still will be times when all of us will overeat, or for some of us overdrink, and that's normal. And it doesn't mean that somehow you failed, or you just are undisciplined, or that you have to revert back to the way that you used to do things. It's no, this is just part of the normal human experience. And if I want to, I can spend time just considering, what's going on in this moment that I feel like I need more ice cream? Is there I mean, obviously it's not just physical hunger. Is there something else that I need in this moment? I just have to really be focused and committed to making it happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a big aspect to consider is what are we focused on?
Hmm.
A lot of what I work with my clients on is being focused on one thing at a time so
Hmm.
that you can do an absolutely spectacular job in whatever it is that you are focused on.
Hmm.
So for example, I have a lot of clients who they have kids, those kids have sports. I'm like, if you're gonna go watch them play sports, watch them play sports. Like, be fully engaged, don't be checking your phone, focus on them so that you feel like you've been present in the moment with them. And then when it's time for you to go home and check email, be 100% checking your email. Don't try and listen to them with half of your ears while you're doing that. Be focused on one thing at a time. And it kind of comes back to what you are encouraging here, which is like, stay focused on it. Use all of your senses. Take in the whole experience. Stop trying to fragment yourself into all these little tiny pieces where you're not really quite doing anything well.
That's such great wisdom, Anna, because it's only from that place of really being present can we notice if there's any of that restless energy happening in our body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where let's say we're eating the ice cream and all of a sudden we're believing, I need more. Like, this isn't enough. I need more. This is my favorite. If we're fully present, we're noticing that happening. I mean, that's the amazing part about being human is we can observe ourselves going through that emotional experience and then also calm ourselves down like, oh, okay, this is what I do with myself when I get really excited about eating something. It's like, okay, just let's calm down. This isn't an emergency. You want to really enjoy it. And the only way you can really enjoy it is by eating it consciously and with full awareness. And so when we are fully present, we can just use our breathing and soothe that sense of urgency or busyness that might be the habitual response that we want to fall back into. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that like being present too, if you're at your kid's soccer game, also allows you to almost break that cycle of frenzied energy that we're bringing there. It's like, okay, got to get this done. Okay, what's next? Okay, look at okay, what do I have? This is, I mean, I fall into this where I'm like, okay, what's after this? Like, okay, I'm thinking ahead to the next thing, and I'm bringing that energy throughout my day, and of course, then I feel exhausted by the end of it. But if I'm able to just like stay centered and say, okay, let me just focus right now on this conversation I'm having with Anna, it's a much calmer experience.
Mm-hmm. The
And
world will go on. Our work will be waiting for us when we're done here.
yes, and we're just able to show up that much better for ourselves and our relationships and in the projects that we're working on. So that is just one of the key components to being mindful.
I'm also under the belief that when you learn a new tool or skill in one area of your life, it does translate into the others. And so that's the parallel that I'm trying to make here, is that by being fully present for the experience of eating your food,
Mhm.
you can also be fully present in a conversation, or you can be fully present in a hobby. And those experiences where our full attention is on one thing, those tend, at least for me, to be the most fulfilling and allow me to feel like I've made the best use of my time. Now, it does come with the caveat that sometimes we have to set boundaries around that.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, for me, would I love to sit in conversation with someone all day for 3 hours? I can do that. But the reality of my day is, nope, sometimes I have to cut it short. Sometimes I have to have limits around it. But even just like consciously choosing that and then engaging in the activity allows me to feel like I'm not frazzled. I'm not trying to juggle 20 things at once. Really think the gift of being present plays out everywhere for us.
I 100% agree. And especially when it comes to eating and drinking, I think the cue to come back to presence and come back to awareness can often be your body. It's just
Mm,
like, and this is what I tell my clients a lot. It's like if you find yourself thinking about food, or you're tempted to eat something, or you're looking through a menu online, or you're daydreaming about food, try to gently bring yourself back to your body. Like, have that be the moment of awareness. So just check in with your body. Like, how's my body doing? Am I hungry? And that's what brings us back to the present moment is like, okay, what's our body telling us? Not
mhm,
only, we can check in with physical signs of hunger, but we can also check in with our emotional well-being. Like, how am I feeling right now? And that
mhm.
can really help us just stay current in our present experience.
Absolutely. What do you have any tips for coming back to your body? Maybe explain that to any of our listeners who might not know what that means.
When I say coming back to your body, what I mean is redirecting yourself away from the thoughts that you're thinking back to what's happening inside, like let's just say your stomach, for instance. And this is usually the way that I'm talking about it with my clients is if they find themselves fantasizing about their favorite food, or maybe oftentimes my clients will snack in between work projects, right, as a way to just almost feel relief momentarily and then kind of reset and get back into another project. And so before, if they're thinking about food, I often say, okay, use that as a clue. If you're thinking about eating something, in that moment when you notice yourself thinking about food, try and remember to just come back to your body and just notice what's happening in your stomach and just ask yourself, okay, what's my stomach telling me right now? Is my stomach like empty? Is it growling? Is it saying we need food?
Mhm.
If not, if you feel a sense of peace and calm in your stomach, there's nothing you need to do. It's not time to eat. So that's what I mean by redirecting yourself to your body. And I think that if you notice yourself kind of feeling antsy or restless when it's time to eat, and you notice a change in your emotional vibration, I often ask people to just kind of use their breath as a way to enter back into their body. So taking a deep breath and just like sinking down into your body and just noticing like, where is that energy coming from? And can I just like stay present and notice what that feels like? And allow myself to just observe it. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to ignore it. I don't have to distract myself, but I can just breathe through it and just recognize that it's there. If I want to take it to a deeper level, I can figure out, oh, what is that? What am I feeling? Do I feel like I'm in a rush? Am I panicking because I'm hungry? Am I nervous? Am I like frustrated? I can start to maybe label what's happening. And that really is the beginning of just processing how you feel without turning to food as a way to feel better.
Absolutely. As you were describing that, I started noticing the sensations in my stomach. I even noticed that like, ooh, my foot is kind of stuck here. And so I was just moving, feeling my body, breathing with you as well. I think in our day to day, we work in a very fast paced environment where there are so many requests coming at us from various directions. We rarely stop to ask ourselves how we're feeling. We rarely stop to check in with our physical body to see if we're holding tension, to see if we feel okay, to see if we're hungry to that
Hmm.
point. And so I think that's
Hmm.
something that we can do more often is check on that mind body connection, check on how we're feeling before diving into the next task or before running off to the next event. Because I know for me, when I don't make those efforts to give myself a break, that's how I get to 8 p.m. having not eaten, having not taken a second for myself, and that's when all of the bad decisions start happening.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? It sometimes comes down to even scheduling that time for yourself.
Mhm.
Right? Because it's so easy to fall back into that habit of just checking off the next thing on the list or responding to the next message that comes in or prioritizing, everything else other than what's happening for ourselves in that moment. So it requires a certain level of focus, like I said before, to make this shift. But once you do, and once you take that time to just check in with yourself, I mean, at least like what my clients say is that it just makes all the difference in the world in terms of feeling more relaxed, in terms of feeling more centered, feeling being able to kind of refocus on the work that they're doing. I think it feels like a luxury. I
Mhm.
think it feels like a luxury for those of us who aren't used to giving ourselves that time to just stop and just like notice, just even asking yourself, how are you feeling right now?
Mhm. Oh, I know
Right?
that there are a lot of people listening who they would love to feel more relaxed and more centered for sure. For those of you who are listening, if this is resonating with you, or if you feel like you found yourself in any of these examples, this could be a really big clue that this is something that you might want to work on. This might be something that you want to spend some focused energy exploring for yourself. Molly, if people want to reach out to you or if they want to get their hands on the book, how would they do that?
The best place to find me is either on my website, mollyzemek.com, or I also have a weekly podcast called Weight Loss for Food Lovers, where I talk a lot about this process. I interview a lot of my clients. And so that's another great resource for people who are looking for help.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time today. For those who are listening, I will link everything in the show notes for you. Molly, thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Anna.
All right. And for all of those listening, we will talk to you next week. I love you. Keep going.